In popular culture, you are certainly no stranger to these two clowns. One wears a purple suit, his smile carved from ear to ear. He kills to prove a single point. This world at its core is nothing but a joke. The other lives beneath the sewers, appearing where children feel safest, holding a balloon, beckoning them closer. What he feeds on is fear. Two clowns, two nightmares. But why a clown? Why exactly is the fool, the one born to make others laugh, the most terrifying figure in the modern imagination? The answer lies with a 19th century German philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer, who understood why both were inevitable. Schopenhauer said the world is driven by a blind, purposeless force that operates continuously and endlessly. He called it the will. And he said there are two kinds of fools in this world. The first lives in illusion, happy and oblivious. This is the kind the will favors most. The second knows he is performing. He chooses the face of the fool because he has seen through something society keeps hidden. Laughter is the only language that renders power helpless. Joker and Pennywise are what happens when the boundary between those two kinds disappears. When the one who sees everything stops concealing it. When the comic is stripped of its shell and exposed raw. We fear clowns because they are too familiar. And that is what Schopenhauer wants to tell you. The word fool carries a history longer and darker than most of us have ever imagined. According to Britannica, a fool is a comic entertainer whose madness or imbecility, real or pretended, made him a source of amusement and gave him license to abuse and poke fun at even the most exalted of his patrons. Professional fools flourished from the days of the Egyptian pharaohs until well into the 18th century, finding a place in societies as diverse as the Aztec Empire of Mexico and the courts of medieval Europe. They were often deformed, dwarfed, or crippled. People believed that deformity could avert the evil eye, and that the ridicule the fool endured could transfer ill luck from the ridiculed to the one doing the ridiculing. He was a filter for misfortune. In 7th century Ireland, fools were regarded as being inspired with poetic and prophetic powers, standing at the boundary between the human world and forces beyond ordinary understanding. And there is a darker hypothesis about his deepest origins. The fool may have begun as a sacrificial scapegoat, a substitute for a royal victim in ancient ritual. The costume of the medieval court jester, with his pointed bells, motley coat, and bauble, bears striking similarities to sacrificial garments from rituals thousands of years older. He was kept to carry the burden others refused. Beneath all of that history lies a fundamental division. There are two kinds of fools. The natural fool, who is genuinely foolish, blindly confident, living in illusion, wholly controlled by the will without knowing it. The artificial fool, the intelligent person who chooses to play the fool, seeing through everything while knowing when to conceal himself behind that face. The boundary between the two is never clear from the outside. And that is precisely why it works. The entire history of the fool is the history of that fragile boundary. In tarot, card number 0 is the fool. The image on the Rider-Waite deck, published in 1909, depicts a young man walking while looking up at the sky. In his hand is a white rose symbolizing innocence and purity. A small bundle tied to a staff holds everything he owns. Before him is a cliff edge. At his heels, a dog barks in warning. He does not look down. 0 is the most interesting number in the entire major arcana system. The 22 major cards are numbered from 0 to 21, beginning with the Fool and ending with the World. The Fool is both the first and the last card of the journey. The circle closes at the very point it opened. 0 represents infinity, the state before all division, before the will began shaping the world into objects of desire. Tarot, a name derived from the Italian root tarok, meaning foolishness, is in its entirety the fool's journey from beginning to end. Schopenhauer described the will as something operating even before consciousness fully forms. A child enters the world already carrying the will, crying for food, for warmth, for attention. Intellect arrives later, slower and weaker, kindled gradually by experience and suffering. Card 0 depicts the moment before that struggle begins, when the will has not yet accumulated enough weight to pull a person downward. He walks forward, the dog barks, the abyss waits. The real question of this card is the question Schopenhauer posed for his entire philosophy. When the journey ends and you return to the starting point, you will look like the fool you were at the beginning. But is it the same foolishness? Arthur Schopenhauer published Die Welt als Wille und Vorstellung in 1818. He was 30 years old and confident that he had just written one of the most important books ever produced. He was right. But he had to wait nearly 40 years for the world to recognize it. There is a satisfying irony here. The philosopher who wrote about the stupidity of mankind spent nearly 4 decades being ignored by mankind, the will proving its own argument. His philosophical system rests on a single foundation. The world is governed by the will, and intellect is merely the tool serving it. The will is not your particular desire or mine. It is the force running through everything, from the pull of gravity to the flow of a river to the deepest cravings of human beings. Blind, purposeless, perpetually seeking satisfaction and never truly finding it. Schopenhauer compared human life to a pendulum, swinging endlessly between suffering when desire goes unmet and boredom once it is. Intellect is the only thing capable of seeing through that game. Yet intellect is still only the will's servant, kindled to help the will find satisfaction more efficiently. When the will is too strong, intellect can no longer question its master. Stupidity is the default condition of humanity. Genuine intellect is the rare exception, and its price is seeing too clearly things others live better without seeing. Schopenhauer described the psychological portrait of the fool with astonishing precision, nearly 2 centuries before modern psychology called the same phenomenon the Dunning-Kruger effect. The fool is blindly confident because his intellect is insufficient to recognize its own deficiency. Intelligent people tend to hesitate and doubt because they have seen enough to know how much they have not yet seen. Logic is completely ineffective against the fool because he is not seeking truth, he is defending the will and the ego. Any argument threatening those things is rejected immediately, usually with entirely sincere outrage. What people commonly call fate is mostly their own stupidity. That sentence is short, cold, and merciless. It is also the truest thing he ever wrote about the relationship between human beings and their own consequences. The natural fool lives in what Schopenhauer called the fool's paradise. He is happy because his intellect is not yet strong enough to shatter the illusion that happiness is real, not fabricated. He is genuinely feeling it. Yet the will never allows illusions to survive indefinitely. When the illusion collapses, anyone who has built nothing outside of it will be crushed entirely by reality. The intelligent person suffers more because he sees too clearly. The fool is happier because he sees less. Both are being driven by the will, only in different ways and with different consequences. Schopenhauer observed this with the curiosity of a scientist, not the pity of a moralist. He advised, "When you encounter the stupidity or baseness of another person, treat it like a newly discovered mineral specimen, useful only for expanding your knowledge of human nature. Never allow it to disturb you. Stupidity is a condition, not a mistake." Miguel de Cervantes published the first part of Don Quixote in 1605. It is commonly called the first modern novel, and its protagonist is one of the most perfect illustrations of what Schopenhauer would later describe as reading oneself stupid. In Parerga and Paralipomena, Schopenhauer warned about a particularly dangerous form of stupidity: the person who reads excessively without reflection. He accumulates information but allows the will to determine what he absorbs and what he ignores. Knowledge is used to reinforce illusion rather than break it. He does not learn to understand the world. He learns to arm what he already wanted to believe. Don Quixote read so many books of chivalry that his mind lost the ability to distinguish fiction from reality. He looked at windmills and saw giants. He looked at an ordinary peasant woman and saw a noble princess. He rode his aging horse into the world to protect the innocent and punish the wicked. And every time he intervened, things grew worse. Sancho Panza was beaten. Those he tried to free were punished more severely. He produced disaster wherever he went, while fully confident he was carrying out a noble mission. What people commonly call fate is mostly their own stupidity. Every catastrophe in Don Quixote's life is the direct consequence of an illusion he constructed and refused to abandon. The will in him wanted to be a knight, wanted meaning and glory. Intellect was weaker than that will and could not question it. Intellect was bent to serve the illusion rather than shatter it. When the will is strong enough, intellect becomes the attorney defending what the will has already decided, not the independent judge seeking truth. The most tragic moment is not the disasters he caused along the way. On his deathbed, Don Quixote wakes with complete clarity. The illusion is gone. He looks back across his entire life and understands what happened. Those around him, the very people who had mocked him for years, now try to convince him that he is still a knight, still great, still right. Don Quixote knows the truth. Shortly after, he dies. When the illusion breaks, there is nothing left to live for, because he never built anything real outside of it. The will loses its object, and when the will loses its object, life loses its energy. Don Quixote did not die of illness. He died because reality arrived too late and too suddenly. The fool's paradise is not a state worth envying. It is real in the present moment, but the will always destroys it. The question is not whether to live in illusion or not. The question is whether you want reality to break you when you are prepared, or when you have nothing left to stand on. Fyodor Dostoevsky began writing The Idiot in 1867 with a stated aim recorded in a letter to his niece. He wanted to portray a truly good man, a positive and beautiful individual in a world of corruption and moral decay. He placed that person in the middle of 19th century Russian society to see what would happen. The result was Prince Myshkin, and the result of that experiment is something Dostoevsky, Schopenhauer, and anyone who has ever lived in society already knows, but rarely states plainly. The world crushes people like that. Myshkin returns from a Swiss sanatorium where he was treated for epilepsy and idiocy, a term that was a genuine medical designation until the 20th century. From the very first train ride into St. Petersburg, he is thrown directly into a social machine where every relationship is measured in money, status, and self-interest. Myshkin enters that world with no armor at all. He speaks truthfully. He sees people clearly enough to make them uncomfortable, and he does not conceal what he sees. Society calls him an idiot. Myshkin has a very strong intellect, strong enough to see through the will operating in every person around him, to see the desires, fears, and self-deceptions behind every polite exchange. His problem lies somewhere else entirely. He never learned how to conceal that. Schopenhauer wrote in Parerga and Paralipomena that intelligent people are resented because they make others uneasy. Another person's intellect is a mirror no one wants to look into because it reflects back what people have worked to cover over. The one holding that mirror without any filter is not a hero, but a threat to the social order maintained by shared illusions. And society handles that threat in the only way it knows. Dostoevsky placed the most famous line of the novel in Myshkin's mouth: "Beauty will save the world." This is usually quoted as an optimistic declaration. Yet in the context of the novel, it is spoken by a man who is subsequently crushed by the world entirely. Truth and tragedy coexist, and Dostoevsky leaves both there without resolving either. Myshkin's counterpart is Ippolit, a young atheist and nihilist dying of tuberculosis. Ippolit declares something Schopenhauer would recognize as the voice of an intellect that has seen the will clearly and chosen resistance over release. Better to suffer and know the worst than to be happy in a fool's paradise. A lucid choice between two states, both traps in their own way. The lesson Schopenhauer draws from Mishkin is not a lesson about goodness or beauty. It is a lesson about an essential gap, the gap between seeing clearly and knowing how to use what you see. Mishkin sees through everything and carries that directly outward, unguarded. Parsifal, the figure we meet next, needed 20 years to learn to bridge that gap. Parsifal is a figure from Arthurian legend, and his name in many interpretations derives from young fool, or one who knows nothing. He grew up in the forest with his mother, entirely separated from the world of knights and its rules. One day he saw knights riding past and decided to leave his mother and become one himself. His natural will, not yet checked by intellect, carried him into the world. He was the natural fool at his most elemental. In his travels, Parsifal reaches the Grail Castle. There, the Fisher King endures a wound that will not heal, severe enough that he cannot live fully, but not enough to let him die. He is suspended in between. His kingdom withers alongside his unhealed wound. Schopenhauer would recognize it immediately. The will damaged, no longer strong enough to desire, yet unable to release. Parsifal witnesses all of this. He sees the Fisher King in agony, and he asks nothing. The reason is not indifference. On his way to the castle, Parsifal's teacher instructed him that a person of good breeding does not ask too many questions. The social will, the accumulated weight of expectation, convention, and fear of judgment from others, was governing Parsifal's behavior rather than his own intellect. He saw genuine suffering and deferred to etiquette. The following morning, when Parsifal leaves the castle, it vanishes. He knows he has missed something important he cannot name. Then begin 20 years of wandering, failure, and loss. Each mistake in those years taught Parsifal something more about the distance between what he believed was right and what actually was, about the distance between the rules society handed him and the judgments his own intellect had to make. Intellect gradually grew stronger than the will, not through books or abstract reasoning, but through the real consequences of his own stupidity. When Parsifal returns to the Grail Castle, he asks the Fisher King one question: "What ails you?" "The kingdom is healed." That question did not come from innocence. The innocent Parsifal of 20 years earlier had the opportunity to ask it and did not. It came from someone who had traveled far enough to understand that social rules about courtesy, about when to speak and when to stay silent, are expressions of the collective will. Genuine intellect sometimes demands asking the question at exactly the right moment, even if it looks foolish. Mishkin had intellect, but never learned to navigate the world of the will. Parsifal learned navigation through 20 years of suffering. Both could see through things. Only one learned how to use what he saw and when. Schopenhauer wrote in Parga and Paralipomena a sentence most people pass over because it sounds like practical advice rather than philosophy. A wise man can play the fool, but a fool cannot play the wise man. That is not practical advice. It is the complete summary of every survival strategy available in a world governed by the will. In the philosophy of art, there is a definition of the comic. The comic is the tragic in the form of the beautiful. Laughter does not erase pain. Laughter wraps pain in a form human beings can endure, even appreciate. And through that form, pain can be transmitted without being blocked. Schopenhauer analyzed laughter in the same terms in Parga. It arises from the sudden contradiction between what we expect and what reality reveals, between an abstract concept and a concrete truth. Each burst of laughter is a moment when the will is unmasked, an illusion cracked open. The professional fool, the artificial fool, turns truth into laughter so that truth can be heard. In the king's court, the man who speaks plainly gets his head cut off. History records many court jesters who were executed for going too far. But that number is small compared to the jesters who survived for decades alongside power by learning to wrap truth inside entertainment. Truth in the fool's mouth passes through gates that naked truth cannot. The proverb says, "Fortune favors the simple." From the outside, this reads as consolation for the naive or the unlucky. It contains a sharper observation. The fool, who does not compete, does not accumulate, does not build networks of influence and enemies, stands far enough outside the will's rotation that the rotation simply passes him by. He is protected not because he is loved. He is protected because he has not participated in the game enough to become a target. In a society governed by the will, the one with nothing to fight over tends to outlast the one who fights for everything. Schopenhauer observed this through philosophy. Folk wisdom compressed it into a proverb. Both arrived at the same conclusion. The darkest layer comes from anthropological history. Britannica records that the fool may have originated as a sacrificial scapegoat, a substitute for a royal victim in ancient ritual. The costume of the medieval court jester, with his pointed bells and motley coat, bears striking similarities to ancient sacrificial garments. The fool was kept in the palace in part because people believed he absorbed the community's misfortune, that the ridicule he endured transferred ill luck to those doing the ridiculing. The protection of fortune has its own price. The fool is sheltered because he carries the weight others refuse to carry. The court jester was permitted to speak truth to the king because he had stepped into the role of the one who absorbs social misfortune. The cost was that he had to be the object of laughter at all times, always the lowest in every room, always prepared to be humiliated. Schopenhauer synthesizes these three layers into a single strategy. The intelligent person who wants to survive in a society governed by the will learns to appear harmless. Naked intellect creates enemies because it is a mirror no one wants to look into. Intellect wrapped in the form of laughter, of apparent simplicity, of willingness to be laughed at, passes through gates that seriousness and directness can never cross. The man who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience. That is not pure contempt. It is a cold observation about the only way truth can reach the greatest number of people. Wrapped in something the crowd can digest. And to be digestible, it sometimes has to look like foolishness. By this point, the portrait of the complete fool begins to take shape. He has moved beyond Don Quixote's fool's paradise. The illusion sustained until reality crushes the person who built nothing outside of it. He has escaped Mishkin's tragedy. The man who sees clearly but carries his intellect outward without knowing how to shield it. And he has completed Parsifal's 20-year journey and arrived at the other side. The complete fool has an intellect strong enough to see through the will of himself and those around him. He has tasted enough of the consequences of his own stupidity to know the distance between illusion and reality. And he has mastered the art of the artificial fool, knowing when truth needs to be spoken directly, when it needs to be wrapped in laughter, and when silence is the only right answer. The comic is the tragic in the form of the beautiful, and the complete fool is the one who can choose that form at will. His attitude toward the stupidity of others is what Schopenhauer described in Counsels and Maxims. Observe as a mineralogist, add the finding to your knowledge of human nature, and do not allow it to disturb or diminish you. A wise man can play the fool, but a fool cannot play the wise man. That sentence defines the complete fool by the single capacity that sets him apart. He can choose. He can choose when to appear foolish, when to reveal his intelligence, and when to stand at the boundary between the two. Freedom does not come from being perpetually intelligent or perpetually carefree. It comes from the ability to move consciously between those two states as circumstances require. Why is the fool an archetype that never dies? Joker and Pennywise are the modern answer, yet they are only the two most recent versions in an unbroken chain. Before them was the medieval court jester, whom kings needed like air. Before that were fool figures in the religious rituals of India and pre-Christian Europe. Further back still are the ancient sacrificial scapegoats that anthropology is still decoding. Schopenhauer's answer is cold and precise. The fool is immortal because the condition that creates him is immortal. The will never diminishes. Stupidity as the default human condition has not changed across centuries. Each generation reproduces the same structure. A majority governed by the will, and a minority of intellect learning to live within it. As long as that structure persists, the fool is necessary to prove it exists. The man who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience. That sentence is itself immortal, because the subject it describes is immortal. The 21st century, with its social media and amplifying algorithms, has only made it more accurate. The artificial fool is also immortal, but differently. He is immortal not because society continuously produces him, but because he is the only figure in the system who is not wholly consumed by it. He stands far enough outside the rotation to observe it from a safe distance. The observer outlasts the player, because the player is worn down by the game itself. Card 0 returns. The circle closes at the point it opened. The person standing at the cliff's edge now looks like the one who stood there at the start, looking up at the sky, the dog barking, the abyss waiting. But it is not the same person. He has completed the journey. He knows the abyss is there, and he steps forward anyway. Schopenhauer did not write warm, encouraging conclusions. That was not his manner. Yet from the entirety of his thinking about the fool, 3 things can be drawn. Recognize your own fool's paradise before it collapses. Don Quixote did not recognize his until it was too late. Reality does not wait for your readiness, and it is no kinder to those who are completely unprepared. Intellect that sees through the will is necessary, but not sufficient. Mishkin saw clearly and was crushed by the world. Parsifal spent 20 more years learning how to use what he saw at exactly the right moment. The distance between those two people is the entire difference. Learning to play the fool is the highest form of social intelligence. The comic is the tragic in the form of the beautiful. And the most intelligent person in the room is often the one voluntarily wearing the fool's costume. Laughter passes through gates that seriousness can never cross. Schopenhauer left one final sentence for the intelligent person living in the world of the will. The man who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience. That is a warning, and it is also advice.